Welcome to Philadelphia. Prior to this trip, being from the country myself, I rarely drove into large cities. It's been kind of amazing on this trip how many times we've now driven into some of the bigger cities of our country. Definitely a little nerve-wracking for me, but it was definitely neat to see the sights that Philadelphia had to offer. The Declaration House kind of has some interesting history. The original house was built in 1775. Thomas Jefferson rented rooms out of it in 1776. That's where he wrote the Declaration of Independence. It was torn down in 1883 and then rebuilt in 1975 for the bicentennial. This is an archaeology site outside of the Liberty Bell Center. Interesting to see that they're finding history like that right here in downtown Philadelphia. The Liberty Bell was really neat to see in person. It was commissioned in 1752 and first cast in London. The Liberty quote on the bell is actually from Leviticus 25:10. The bell first cracked when it was first hung. Pass and Stowe recast the bell twice before it was taken down because of the crack. Still really neat to see in person. Independence Hall. This is where both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were debated and adopted. The original building was built in 1753. The wings have been rebuilt over the years, but this main center building here, the outside is still original, though the interior's been updated and fixed from time to time. And this is Carpenter's Hall. This was built in 1775. It was built for and is still owned and operated by the Carpenters Company of Pennsylvania. They're the country's oldest craft guild. For a time, when Independence Hall was being used for other purposes, the First Continental Congress actually met here. In talking with the staff, the outside original bricks are from the original build in 1775, though the interior has been changed. If I recall correctly, the gentleman we were talking to said this used to be 2 rooms, not one big room. Very informative staff that had a lot of information about the building there. So neat to see a building that built that long ago is still owned and operated by the original company that built it. Chase Bank, 2nd and Chestnut. We found this interesting, just the architecture was amazing. This was the Corn Exchange National Bank, built between 1900 and 1903. Christ Church was actually founded in 1695. The current building, main building, was built in 1744, and the steeple was added in 1754. When the steeple was added, it was the tallest building in North America. It is still an active church today. The Betsy Ross House. This was a neat place to go to, and some historians disagree whether this was her house or not. Some believe it was a house that was actually right next to this one, that ironically was torn down to make this house safer in fires, etc. Some believe this is the house. Either way, it's a neat old house built around 1740, added on to in 1750s, 1760s. Betsy Ross would have lived here between 1776 and 1779. She was an upholsterer and was known by George Washington and some of the other fathers of our country. Her grandkids relate a story about how she used to talk about how George Washington and others were at her house to come up with the idea for the flag. They had neat displays. It was fun to walk through. The stairs in the house were so narrow and so windy. They definitely would not pass code today. They did a really good job of keeping most of the exhibits period correct. And some are believed to actually be from Betsy Ross's family. And we got to do the whole tour, including the basement. Really neat displays. Definitely worth it if you happen to be in Philadelphia. And the USS Olympia initially wasn't even on our radar of things to see, but a good friend of mine mentioned it, that we should go if we had a chance. Definitely glad we did. This ship was launched in November of 1892. It was commissioned in 1895. It is the oldest steel-hulled American warship afloat. Steam-powered. And from the outside, it does look like a more modern ship. But then you get inside, like the officers' quarters that we were walking through here, and the woodwork is just amazing. So ornate and elaborate. Few specs on this. It's 344 foot long. Its beam is 53 feet and has a draft of 21 feet 6 inches. Kind of cool how you can see all the different levels through the grates. It carried 4 8-inch, 10 5-inch, and 14 6-pounder guns on the ship. And this was Commodore Dewey's flagship in the Battle of Manila Bay. The ship returned to the United States triumphant after the Spanish-American War in 1899. The ship was then reactivated for World War I, and its last major mission was bringing the unknown soldier of World War I home to America for burial. Amazing piece of history that we almost missed altogether. Thanks, Mike, for the tip on this one. Even up in the wheelhouse, amazing the woodwork. The ship was decommissioned in 1922 and saved from scrapping in 1954. This plaque marks the location where the unknown soldier was brought home. Valley Forge, the site of the winter encampment of the Continental Army in 1777-78. It was here under General Washington's leadership the Army came together as a cohesive and disciplined fighting force. December 19th of 1777, 12,000 soldiers and 400 women and children marched into Valley Forge. It became the fourth largest city in the colonies at the time. Several of these cabins were made to house everybody. These are reproductions, not the original ones, but still neat to see. 12 bunks per cabin. The camp here lasted about 6 months. It was quite a diverse group as well. There were free and enslaved African American soldiers, civilians, indigenous people, wealthy officers, impoverished enlisted, and European immigrants. This is one of the many redoubts or earthen forts created at Valley Forge. It's just up from Philadelphia, and the British Army was encamped in Philadelphia at the time. Because of weather and road conditions and supplies, the Continental Army was never attacked while they were here. Though the Continental Army lost 2,000 soldiers just from disease while they were encamped here for those 6 months. It was intriguing to learn the changes in the Army while they were here. how they seemed more empowered and more cohesive and disciplined when they left here. And there's a lot of tales and images of starving and half-naked soldiers arriving here in 1777, and it wasn't as bad as a lot of folks like to depict, but it wasn't easy either. The hardships they endured here brought them closer together. They had new training, learned new methods, and came out a stronger group of folks that eventually won our independence. It was amazing how much ground was covered by the encampment. But when you think that at the time they were the fourth largest city in the colonies, it does make sense. George Washington chose this spot because it was an easily defended plateau above Philadelphia. When they finally did break camp, the British were moving out of Philadelphia because France had joined America in the war, and they were headed from Philadelphia to New York to support their strongholds there. And George Washington and his new improved army took off on the chase. This is a train depot not too far from the headquarters that Washington was based at here at Valley Forge. There had been a storm that came through first part of September. We were here in October, that flooded this whole area. Because of the flood damage, unfortunately, the headquarters house was closed, so we weren't able to go inside. This house is also known as the Isaac Potts House and was built in 1773. And Washington used this house as his headquarters during their encampment. All right, question of the day.
We're at Valley Forge. We're at Artillery Park. This is where they kept the majority of the cannons. The idea being that if they had them in a central location, they could rush them to wherever they needed, to wherever was being attacked. Although the roads were often muddy and the horses were starving, so they probably wouldn't have been able to rush very quickly.
And this is Major General Frederick Wilhelm Baron von Steuben. Interesting history about him. He was assigned to training our troops while here.